Well, hello. Today we're going to be talking about positive emotions, happiness, and well-being. You'll find this information in Chapter 6 of your textbook. So there's a fascinating study that was done by Alice Eisen, I-S-E-N, at Cornell University, described in your chapter, where she set up her study so that half of the participants would find the coin in the payphone, whereas the other half wouldn't. And she found that the participants who found a coin in the payphone were more likely to help out somebody passing by who needed help with carrying books, or if they dropped their papers, help them pick up their papers. And she reasoned that when we are in a positive state of mind, when we experience positive emotion, that we are more likely to reach out to others in a helpful kind of way. She also believed that we tend to be more flexible in our thinking and better at problem solving. And she did research to support these ideas. Another fascinating study was done with physicians, medical doctors, who were given a gift of candy. And this is a fascinating finding, I believe, because the doctors who were given the gift of candy tended to show better problem-solving skills in evaluating a case. They didn't actually eat the candy at the time, but being given the candy had that effect. I remember when I was a little boy and I would go to the doctor, I always looked forward to getting a sucker, no matter what other kinds of things might happen there that were sometimes unpleasant. So ever since I learned about Eisen's study, I thought about, turning the tables there and taking a gift of candy to my doctor, although I have not yet done it. One important area of research that's described in our chapter is the important work by Barbara Fredrickson on her broaden and build model of positive emotion. For me, this is one of the more exciting lines of research in the field of positive psychology, and I hope you enjoy learning about it. You also have a video of her, as well as various other people we learned about throughout our course, talking about her work. Barbara Fredrickson points out that negative emotion narrows while positive emotion expands. Think about that for a moment. Negative emotion narrows while positive emotion expands. Just think about a time when you were angry. When we become angry, our focus tends to narrow to the thing that we're angry about or towards the person that we're angry with. We can think of little else but what we're angry about. Our focus narrows. It limits our ability to think about other aspects of our life, or even constructive ways of going about dealing with a difficult situation in which we are experiencing anger. On the other hand, Fredrickson points out that positive emotion expands. When we are in a positive emotional state, it opens our mind up to considering new possibilities. Just think about the exercise on keeping a gratitude journal. When we reflect on the things about which we are grateful, it tends to have a positive effect on what we are feeling at the time. And it may help us to think about ourselves and our life experiences in new ways that are constructive and that help us to consider new possibilities. So this is a basic idea for Fredrickson, that negative emotion narrows and positive emotion expands. So she goes on to explain what she describes as an upward spiral of positive emotion. And with every aspect of her theory that we will be talking about today, she has done studies that support these ideas. You can read about them in our textbook. And there are some primary source references on her in your bibliography if you'd like to go a little further. So this idea of an upward spiral of positive emotion looks like this. So when we are able to experience positive emotion, it opens up our mind to considering new thought action patterns, possibilities. And when we engage in those positive thought action patterns, it helps us to experience more positive emotion, which leads to even more positive thought action patterns. So you can see where this is going, this upward spiral of positive emotion. Some of Fredrickson's research also suggests that when we can practice this process of experiencing upward spirals of positive emotion, it actually helps this way of thinking and being to become more second nature for us and can become more of what we might call our default way of experiencing life, instead of, for some people, negative emotion being the more characteristic way in which they may experience life. Fredrickson also describes how positive emotions, because they lead to positive thought action patterns, can actually help us build up resources that we can use at a later time, say when we're going through a stressful situation in our lives. There are various ways that these resources can be built up and restored in a sense. But one I'd like to talk with you about has to do with what we might call social resources. When we reach out to other people, when we are supportive of other people and we allow them into our lives to support us, it has a positive effect on our emotions and on the quality of our relationships, so that at some future time, when we may be going through difficulties, we can draw on those resources, rely on them, turning to those people who are part of our support system, our safety net, if you will, to help us get through those difficult times. So again, one of her points is that positive emotions lead to positive thought action patterns, creating an upward spiral of well-being. Second point is that positive emotions help us to build up resources. And the third point she makes is that positive emotions can help us to have an antidote to negative emotion. Sometimes we might think that you cannot experience positive and negative emotion at the same time, but it doesn't exactly work that way. I can be unhappy about one thing and happy about another thing. And her point is that if we are able to, in an intentional way, help ourselves to experience positive emotion, it can help to counteract, not to suppress, but to counteract the effects that negative emotions may be having on us. Going back to the example of gratitude again, personally, I find reflecting on things about which I'm grateful to be extremely helpful to me on a daily basis, and particularly helpful when I'm going through a difficult time. So I might be feeling worried, discouraged, maybe even a bit depressed about something that I'm going through that's difficult for me to deal with. And just by stepping back and thinking about and reflecting on things in my life about which I'm grateful at the same time that I'm dealing with these other issues really helps me to get somewhat of a different perspective, to counteract the negative pull of those other emotions and thoughts that I'm having, and to open up my mind to considering other possibilities for how I might deal with that situation. I'm reminded of a really fascinating study that was done by Seligman and colleagues, where they took depressed individuals who were in treatment and they divided them into two groups. One group got therapy as usual, which might be psychotherapy, medication, or combination of the two. And the other group got therapy as usual, plus they kept a gratitude journal, like we do in our class. And they found that those participants who kept a gratitude journal, in addition to therapy as usual, actually had better outcomes in terms of improvement in mood than the ones who did not keep a gratitude journal. We will be returning to the topic of gratitude later. Another fascinating topic in the field of positive psychology that's discussed some in this section that I wanted to talk with you about today is flow, F-L-O-W, flow. Flow has been touched on already in an earlier reading, and Seligman talks about the work with his colleague Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who has done a lot of work on flow, in his video that you watched. So, as you're probably aware, flow is a special sort of state that Csikszentmihalyi describes that we can experience when we are able to totally immerse ourselves in some sort of endeavor. And the optimal conditions for experiencing flow are when our skill level matches well the level of difficulty of the activity. So if the activity is much easier than our skill level, we may be less inclined to experience flow. Or if it's much harder than our skill level, we also might be less inclined to experience flow. Hopefully, you have activities in your life in which you can totally immerse yourself, where you lose track of time. And it's like time stands still. And you do these activities really for their own sake because of the enjoyment that you gain from them, not because you're trying to impress somebody or win an award or something like that. You just love the activity. I'd like for you to think about if you have those types of activities in your life in which you can lose yourself in that way and experience a state of flow. And as you'll appreciate from learning about flow in our chapter, it can have very beneficial effects on our well-being. One of the things that I really enjoy about teaching is that I'm able to totally lose myself in both the preparation work that goes into teaching and into the teaching activity itself. So right now, for example, when I'm making this video that hopefully will help in appreciating some of the things that we're learning about, I'm totally immersed in this experience. I'm not mindful of time. And I do this because I just really enjoy it for its own sake. And I would miss it if it were not a part of my life. Thinking about the match between skill level and level of difficulty, an example that comes to mind would be, have you ever learned how to play a musical instrument? In the beginning, when you're learning the instrument, it takes a lot of concentration to be able to make the notes, to make the music, to make the sounds of the music, regardless of the particular instrument that you're learning to play. But once we become more proficient at playing the instrument, then it becomes more natural for us. It flows. And we can focus more on just the enjoyment of the activity and the beauty of the music that we are now able to create. And we're much more likely to experience a flow kind of experience once our skill level and the level of difficulty of the activity matches better. So I believe it's in this chapter where the authors talk about some schools now actually have flow centers in them. There's one in Indianapolis that comes to mind. I believe it's the high school, where students are able to go for 1 hour a day and just do whatever they would like to do, that they would enjoy doing. Types of experiences that would more likely help them to experience flow. So as you can see in this chapter, we're learning about some things that we can do in an intentional kind of way in our daily lives that can really contribute to our well-being. We can work towards experiencing more positive emotional states, as Fredrickson talks about. Hopefully we can have activities in our lives that will allow us to experience flow. If you remember the case of Lynn, L-E-N, that Seligman talked about in his video on the birth of positive psychology, his friend Lynn both loved working the New York Stock Exchange, at which he was very successful, and also playing, I believe it was a bridge. He could completely immerse himself in both of these activities to where time sort of stood still for him in a sense. And he loved these activities just for their own sake of being able to participate in it. So I'd like to ask you to think about flow as it relates to your own life. And do you have experiences in your life now that allow you to experience flow? So in thinking about positive emotion and well-being, I would also like to talk a little bit about the work of Sonia Lyubomirsky, in California. I believe you spelled her name Lyubomirsky, who helped us to appreciate that happiness involves contributions from different areas of ourselves and our lives. One of the points that she makes is that happiness is about 50% genetic. So she talks about the idea that each of us has a happiness set point. And we tend to return to that set point after good things happen and bad things happen. It is the level of happiness that we generally tend to experience in our lives. But that's only half of the picture. She also says that happiness is associated with situations that we're in, circumstances in our life, but that these only contribute about 10% to our happiness. And the real good news of her theory, I believe, is her belief that 40%, that's 40% of our happiness results from intentional activities in which we engage. To me, this is really good news. Okay, I can't help what my genetic makeup is. And some things are going to happen in my life that I don't have any control over. Other things I might cause, but some things happen that I don't have any control over that can be stressful and difficult for me to deal with. But 40% of my happiness, according to her work, is associated with the choices that I make, the way I go about living my life, how I cope, what my priorities and values are, that sort of thing. And this is one of the reasons why your weekly positive psychology exercises are so important, because they provide you with some opportunities to, in an intentional way, practice ways of living that fall within that 40% of things we can actually do that can make a difference in our level of happiness. So I hope you're enjoying engaging in those positive psychology exercises. I sure enjoy reading about your experiences with them. And I've noticed that some of you are also doing other positive psychology exercises in your textbook in addition to the ones that are in our weekly course modules. So good for you, and you'll gain even more benefit from this course as a result of that.